Okay, good to know Shabbos. Today we're going to start from the Gemara on Chav Gimel Amar Aleph, starting from the Gemara at the end of the Mishnah. We just learned from the Mishnah a bunch of differences between Isha and Isha. Whether the beginning of the Mishnah starts with Chostala, the different types of um, the machlokes between Rav Shimon and Rebbe, whether there's Chostala on her, what to do with the Minchas Tameh, and the difference between a Kayin and a Kahanis, and the difference between Isha Isha that's a Zar, and we're going to go into the Gemara. We're going to analyze some of these differences. We're going to finish the parak Be'ez Hashem today and start the new parak Matzah Shabbos, the Ezras Hashem. Zot the Gemara. As soon as the Kahuna Minchasei in the Shabbos, anyone who's married to a Kayin, their Minchas are burned. Ketzad. How is it burned? And the problem is like this: the Kayin, any Mincha of a Kayin gets completely burned, but a Kayin of a Zar, so the Isha is a Zar. Assuming she's a zar, if a isha of a kind of a zar, they have to do kmitza. So, like the Gemara is going to explain, Ketzak Kehenes Levi Yisrael v'nisas l'kayin. Ketzak Kehenes Levi Yisrael v'nisas l'kayin. Ein minchas nechalas mifnei sheish loy chelik ba. The mincha cannot be eaten. The shirayim, in other words, after the kmitza is taken off, you cannot eat the carbon, the mincha, because of the kayin's chelik, and a kayin's mincha is burnt completely. So there's no kmitza by kayin's chelik. If a kayin brings his own mincha, the whole thing gets dumped onto the fire, and there's no kmitza, and therefore there's no shirayim, and there's no achila b'chlal. So you can't. You cannot eat part of the mincha because of the kayin, her husband's chelik in it. Rashi explains that he brings from his stuff. It's his stuff, so it's his stuff, so it doesn't get eaten. It cannot be kol completely. In other words, you need to do a kmitza first because of her chelik. How is it her chelik if it's his stuff? Not because they share their assets, but because it's mechaper for her. So because she has a tfisa in it because it's doing something for her. Therefore, it's considered her mincha, and you cannot just dump it on the mizbeach or just put the whole thing on the mizbeach. You need to do kmitza. So now, what do? Ella kaim is carved ba'atzma. You take the kmitza, you put it on the mizbeach, and that you're makar by itself. Shirayim carved ba'atzma, and you throw them, and afterwards you put the rest of the mincha on the mizbeach as well. So, for the Gemara, it should not work. Why? Because we should have a violation of the following rule. Ikri kan koloshu mimenu leishim harehu mibal takriv. There's a drasha Rashi goes through. It's a little bit of a richastik drasha in Kachim that anything that goes onto the mizbeach, the rest of it cannot go back onto the mizbeach. It's like a one-time deal. You move on, you put stuff onto the mizbeach, and that's it. But whatever else is left over from what goes onto the mizbeach. So, for example, the other parts of the shlamim that do not get that they don't get put on right away, they cannot be put on afterwards. Amar Yehuda bereid Rav Shimon ben Pazi the masiklu l'shem eitzim kedabi lezer. The Tanya Rav Lezer Amir l'reich nichayach yatamala. You cannot be mal the second half. This other shirayim of the karbanis that some part went on, you cannot put them on as reich nechayich. In other words, out carbon. But avo atam malei l'shem eitzim. But stam just to have stuff burn on the mizbeach that you're allowed to do. Like eitzim, like it's stam. The rest of the mincha would just go on as fuel, just stam fuel for the mizbeach. But you're not having in mind that you're being makriv part of the mincha. Because that part is hers and it should really be eaten, but you can't because of the chelik of the husband, and you can't do this this double hakrava situation. The chachamim that argue on Rabbi Elazar, what are you going to do? They don't allow this idea. They don't make enough community between what your kavana is, whether you put on to mizbech l'shem eitzim l'shem reich nechayev. Either way, they say it's aser. So how are they going to put on the rest of the mincha? And they want the Avdi Luka Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon. They do like Rabbi Elazar Bar Shimon that the Tanya of Elazar Bar Shimon Aimer Hakaim it's carved ba'atzim that Shirayim misparzim al Beis Hadeshin. The kaimitz goes on the mizbeach, and the rest of it gets put on the Beis Hadeshin again because he has this problem of because you can't be makar, you can't go on the mizbeach. Rabbi Shimon Elazar holds this. This is where the machlekes is by mitzvah chayta of a kain, and that's where the machlekes is. The bas akravu, because really the whole thing is negated to be makar. But I'm not sure what the Rabbanan hold over there to what they should do, but over here they would be masking that there's no choice. Over there, I should look at the machlekes, but I did not. The Makachi Chayvel and there must be the label. Over there he holds that the kohen doesn't have to do kmitza b'chal, so the whole thing goes on the mizbeach l'chayra. But over here, what am I supposed to do? I need to do a kmitza because of the chedek of the lady of the isha. So over here they'd also be asking like Rabbi Shimon that the whole thing goes, that the rest of it goes on the base of Deshin. So they never promise. Either you hold like Rabbi Elazar that says that you could just put the mincha, the rest of the mincha on to the mizbeach begeder eitzim. In other words, not as a mincha, not that you're putting on a mincha, you're just putting on flour that needs to be burnt. It doesn't have any carbon status. Obviously, still kedusha, you can't just take it outside and do whatever you want with it. It has to be burnt, but you're not burning it out mincha, you're burning it out eitzim. And if you don't hold like Rabbi Elazar, you hold like the Rabbanan hold that the whole thing would go on, would be dumped on the base, would be scattered literally, but means burnt on the base of Deshen, like Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. So let the Gemara write. Bas Yisrael Hanasua. In fact, Gemara, my time. What's the question over here? Why do you say that a Bas Kayin doesn't? It's not asking on these words. It's asking later. Bas Kayin that's married to Yisrael, to a Kayin. Why doesn't she? Ad Amakra v'chol mincha. No, not Bas Kayin. Hold on. My time. The common says minchas Kayin is nechas Kayin is right. Yeah, why is a Bas Kayin when she's not married to a Kayin? In other words, only a Kayin's mincha, a Zachar Kayin, is his mincha doesn't get eaten, but a Bas Kayin does. For my time, I'm Makra, the Chaminchas Kayin, Kalal, Tia, Loisaichel, it should be completely burnt and shouldn't eat it. Kayin v'lo Kahanis. The pasuk says Kayin were Medaik, not Kahanis. Zok Dimar Vaiter, Kahanis Mechalalas Kayin in Mischal. How do you know that a Kayin only Kayin can be Mischal? Okay, I'm sorry. That a kohenis could be mischal and a kohen cannot be mischal. Again, we said that if a female kohen has a biasura, she becomes a chalal, or any woman becomes asa kahuna afterwards. But a man kohen, he doesn't. Even though he's doing the chilul, he's being mischal his kids, the wife, the woman. He's not chal. How do we know? It's saying that he should not have these illicit relations, because if then he's going to be mechal his kids. But even in that scenario, the pasuk says he's mechal his kids. It's much that he's not mechal himself. Kehanis mitama, my time, amakra. How come a female kain could be mitama and a zacha can? Emor, because it says in the pasuk regarding saying not to be mitama, it says Emor kahanim b'nei Aharon. Talk to the kahanim, the sons of Aharon, b'nei Aharon v'lei b'nei Aharon. Only the male kahanim. Koyin eichel b'kachik kachim d'chsev kol zacher b'nei Aharon echlen. The same idea that when it's talking about eating kachim, it's only a kaddish kadashim, not kachim stam. So in other words, kachim kalam, even a zar could eat, and his wife could also eat it, or kahanis could also eat it. But it says by kachim by asham chatas, and I want to say there's one more, but I forgot. I looked it up 3 times. Okay, I forgot what it says by mincha, but it's talking about. So I guess so mincha, not shlama, mincha, chatas and asham. My oila nobody eats, but mincha, chatas and asham. Those 3, I think those are the only 3 that she says in Amar Aleph that a kohen is allowed to eat and a kohen is not allowed to eat. Ma bein ish, uma bein ish. Ish ainli ella ish. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a mitzayra. Right, that a man, this is talking about a zar mitzayra, who even a zar, he has to grow out his hair and rip his clothes, and a woman doesn't, because it says ish. It says in the pasuk ish by a mitzayra. In the other ish, isha menai. How do we know that isha b'chlal is in the Indian of tzayra? Kishuaymer ba'tzarua ashavai. Tzarua is a lashon rabim, and it's an extra word, so we're medayik that even women. Harikan shnayim is also women. So what's the purpose of saying ish? If you come to me, marba, ladies, in 3 words, what's the point of saying ish anyway? The Indian shalamata, the next Indian of ish pereya, dafkan ish is pereya v'kayra, and not, and so only a man has to grow out or shave his head as a machlekes or rip his clothing, but a woman does not have to go through that process. Ish madas benai. We don't have a scriptural source for this. We don't have a pasuk in the Torah where we can bank on like we just did before. It says it's halacha mashmasinai by a nazir that only a man can make his son a nazir. It's talking about a katan, not a gadol. Ish megalechas al naziris av ein ha'ish megalechas as naziris aviv. Amar Rabbi Yechon halacha hi benazir. So again, the same idea that it's halacha mashmasinai. As I was. Again, the whole idea is that whoever you yashin, right? The idea of a son being megaleach on his father's on his father's karbanis is that his father was a nazir. He set aside money for the karbanis that he has to bring, the shlam, the chatas, the ayla, whatever he has to bring over there, and then he dies. So his son yarshin the karbanis, and he's also a nazir. He could shave on them. And even when in a case when a daughter does yarshin, he still doesn't. She's still not able to do it, and that's Lachem Mishum Sinai. Ish Mekadesh is Bita as Ish Be'ena Ish Mekadesh as Bita. Again, we said this in the device with the Rabban, a woman could be Mekadesh Adora. The Siv as Bita in Hati L'Shazet. It's talking about, this is by the parsha of Matzah Shema, where the husband stands in front of Bezdin, the father stands in front of Bezdin and says, "I gave my daughter to this guy," and now he's saying that she shouldn't have Besulim. And we said that Dafka the Ish gave. We see that only that the father can give away the daughter, and not the wife, not the mother. When a man sells his wife, same idea. Again, we had machlekes about this, but the Mishnah passes as in Rambam fact passes like that. My timer, it says v'ragmu aisai. We should stone him. Ma aisai. My Isai, Ilay, my Isai, if you can say you only stone him and not her. In other words, the Isha is not Bechla on the Sugya of Skila, Vaksiv, Haitse, says Ish, Hahu, I Esa Isha, Ahi. You take out the man to be stoned or the woman, depending on who did that bear. Ela Isai, Belay Ksusai Dafka, he gets Niskal Aram, Belay Isa, Belay Ksusa, but when she gets, if she has to get Niskal, she wears something. And it said, I think Rashi brings in that it's, or Mesifta, that it's a very, very thin clothing. Again, the whole idea is just that she shouldn't be completely embarrassed and be standing there in front of everybody completely Aram. But we still want to minimize her pain, so we make her clothing very, very thin so that she dies faster. My time amakra, v'talisa isai al eitz, and we should hang him again. This is talking about right after skila or any of the mises bezin. I think they hang, but they say isai v'le isai. Again, it's very similar. Joshua, the whole amid is very, very similar. Joshua is very simple. My timer, why amakra v'nimka b'gnevasai. We learn out we only sell him for his gnevas and not her. I think Taisus Shant, I forgot who it is. I keep on forgetting names. The Taisus Shant, I think, says that even though if you remember from Makis, we learned out. How do we know, according to Rav at least, how do we know that Edom Zayman don't get sold? So the whole need the back and forth because they have amigo that we wouldn't be sold. We wouldn't sell. If they did it, they didn't. If they don't have, they both don't have. But the Rav says, across the board, they don't get sold because of this pasuk. He said, and there's other Joshuas they learn also. What was the other Joshua? I forgot the other Joshua we learned out somewhere else in Shas. That ish is it's begnei vasai. Oh, they don't. He can't be sold for kefil. So if let's say he steals $100 and he has to pay $2, he has $100 to pay back to Karen. He does not get sold for the extra $100. So that's a few diukim. So he says we could be medayik all of them. I don't see exactly how that works, but it's addressed that we have other gezeres that we learn out from here. Hadron Allah Chaya Noitel Chaya Noitel. I'm sorry, Chaya didn't sound familiar. Hadron Allah Chaya Noitel. Shkoyach for joining. Have a good Shabbos, and Bez Hashem Shabbos will continue.